Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Audience is still standing a day and a half later, so I'm impressed.
Very
It usually just like slowly fades out at other events, so CMX is still going strong. Our topic is community is eating the world, and this is sort of a spin-off of Mark Andreessen a few years ago, almost a decade ago, talked about how software was eating the world and this sort of revolution of software coming, and it just really feels like to some of us in the community industry that this is really happening in our industry. And you've sort of been at the forefront of investing in communities and sort of software that's really driven by community. Things like Oculus, the Mighty, and you were CMO at Revolve as well. So I wondered, why? Why has sort of community been a part of what you've been working on the last 10 or 15 years and things you've been investing in?
Yeah, so for me, community is all about how do you actually get people together, whether it's digitally or physically, in a way to create real, authentic bonds. And I naturally, kind of my personal life, like to be a sort of aggregator of people, whether it's putting on frequent dinners or events. And as I look at new exciting investments, or I think about the past of being an operator, running marketing at Revolve, so much of it is how to actually get the customers together, users together in real life or digitally to actually connect and talk with one another. And it's all about, in my personal opinion, brands creating movements that really are a function of the people, the customers, their users that actually make up their company, and also the employees. So for me, it's hard to create any material movement without community at its core. So it's just kind of, I think, how I've been wired really early on in my professional career, and it just kind of came naturally to me.
So is someone that started building a community at Startup Grind, I never looked at the economics of it at all. I just did it because it was something that felt like the right thing to do, and it was something that would be helpful to me and my friends. But you as an investor in a venture capitalist, explicitly it is your job to make your investors a return on the money that they've let you invest in, right? So talk to us about the economics behind investing in communities, or how do you think about that, or the sort of return that a community or that a brand can build around a community? How do you as investors think about how that works together?
Yeah, so for me, I think a lot of it it comes into different pieces. So one, if I look at any given company that I've invested in, whether it's community first or not, community can be such a huge driver for customer acquisition or for lead flow. So even sort of the last thing we heard earlier today, it was a huge driver of leads for Atlassian as a whole. And in a world where you're seeing sort of rising CAC, rising CPAs on digital channels like Facebook, Google, Instagram, and the like, as I'm sitting in the boardroom with some of my companies, I'm seeing them bang their heads against the wall around how do we actually get through all this clutter that is sort of reaching our customer and differentiating yourself relative to our competitors. One of the first things I try to go to is have you thought about trying to build a community? Have you thought about actually leveraging your customers to actually tell your story for you? They're probably your best salespeople because they use your product. They actually understand the ROI they're getting out of your product. So why are we trying to think about creating a marketing strategy that is really sort of only built on ones and zeros and trying to actually treat new customers as these objects on the internet versus let's get them together in a room, or actually find ways in which we actually connect with them in a digital manner to actually have their stories told? That at the end of the day, for me, it's just driving sort of top line revenue. And so if you actually think about how you can actually attribute that, for a SaaS business, every incremental sort of dollar, you multiply that by 10 to 20x, and that's a material amount of sort of equity value that can comprise a business. And I think the best companies, so much of their revenue actually is driven by community. So for me, it's to be the lifeblood of most modern businesses from a marketing perspective.
So just walk us through this, and again, for people that aren't immersed in this every single day, in terms of the financial side of it, I think it's interesting for the people that are doing a lot of the work building these things. Yesterday we had the CEO and founder of Ironclad on stage. You're not an investor in the company, but he said that they'll do $8 million in annual recurring revenue from their community programs this year. So from an investor perspective and from a value creation standpoint, I mean, $8 million sounds like a lot, but actually, as an investor, how would you just value a number like that in terms of like what, increasing the value of the company?
Yeah, fast-growing businesses, kind of back of the envelope, you're valuing revenue anywhere between 10, sometimes we're seeing 20x plus in terms of revenue. So that could be anywhere between 80 to well over $100 million in value. And if you can actually attribute that back to community, that's very material. So it's big money business.
Yeah, and then over the course, and you're as an investor, as a venture capitalist, when are you looking, generally speaking, to get a return on the companies you invest in? Is it 5 years? Is it more? Like, what is the average
that's a little
time?
Tougher. That's more of an art than a science versus when it actually is to sell a company. Especially these days, companies are staying private longer. But some of these journeys could be really, really, really long times. And for us, if you have the ability to, again, you can leverage community or you leverage sort of high growth tactics, actually build massive companies, sometimes we want to stay in there longer because that could be a material sort of return to us and our LPs. So I don't think we usually put years associated to it.
Yeah,
but then you can get lucky like Oculus, it's like 2 years.
Yeah, so Oculus, which you were an investor in, 2 years later was bought by Facebook. But something like, again, in this example of like an Ironclad or a SaaS-based business like that, or somebody that has revenue like that, if you're doing $50 to $100 million in value creation every single year, as an investor, you could be there 2 years, but probably more likely 5 to 10 years, somewhere in that range, maybe even a little longer today. But in theory, on paper, Ironclad or some business like that could be creating between $500 million and over $1 billion of value for the company just based off the community alone. Am I doing the math there?
I think that's totally right. But for me, I think again, it would be companies like Peloton or any company that actually you're building a movement. It's hard to actually attribute revenue to community and not community. So it's a case where, a lion's share of the revenue could be attributed back to, in some way, your community. So it's hard to say. And that's, I think, the importance of community so material, because it really is the lifeblood of these companies, in my opinion.
So we had the CEO of The Mighty speaking here yesterday, and they have millions of people inside of communities around sort of what was looked at originally as like a niche sort of health or disability or the things that people have in their family or themselves. And I wonder just if you could talk about just what motivated you to invest in that company. I'm sure it was like not huge revenue-driven company at the time. I have no idea, but like the huge community, but not necessarily like exploding revenues, or maybe it did. Yeah. But like, what drove you to like be able to say like, hey, this is the kind of community that I think could have a big financial return for my investors at some point?
Yeah. So as a VC for us, first and foremost, what we look for are amazing founders, authentic founders. Mike Porath, his story, having a child that has special needs and really being thrusted in a world where it was just foreign to him in terms of actually what to do, and going online and searching for information where you're looking at, whether it be, I'm not going to throw names out in terms of other companies out there, but they're not authentic stories, authentic narratives around what it actually is to actually go through either firsthand having one of these illnesses or being sort of having a loved one that actually has some of these illnesses. So first and foremost, there's a passion and authenticity around why should this community exist. And then next, at some point in our lives, we're all going to be there. We're all going to have an issue or a time where we have a loved one that actually is going to suffer some illness, or we personally will suffer from some illness because we're not in this world for forever. So for me, like, addressable target market, every human on the planet. It's pretty big. And then 2, authentic founder who actually is mission-driven in terms of building something great. And then 3, if you think about actually bringing all those people together in both a digital and now also kind of physical in real life sort of experience, that's magic. that's something that can actually change the world in a sort of meaningful manner. So it's very rare in this job where you can have the opportunity to invest in a company that not only could have meaningful economic returns to our investors, our LPs, but also could change the world. And it was kind of a no-brainer. And so we're only kind of at the beginning in terms of how that community is being built. But just being able to bring people together that are suffering from some of these issues and actually have them connect and talk with one another and actually kind of grow and build with one another and actually redefine what it is to actually be sick, but no, be mighty, that's amazing.
Yeah. Before you were an investor, you're also an operator. You were the chief marketing officer at Revolve, and you built an influencer community there. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how you saw a community evolve inside of that business and really impact what has become a huge revenue-driving company.
Yeah, so I joined Revolve in 2011 and pretty quickly started working on...
Tell us, for those that don't know, what is Revolve?
So Revolve, LA-based online fashion retailer of predominantly women, but also men's clothes. Just went public recently this past June, and it's a multi-brand fashion and shipped globally, multi-brands. And so Revolve, when I joined, I took sort of first an approach around just optimizing and just getting all sort of our digital channels dialed in. So making sure our email campaigns were tight, personalization was really kind of at a level that we're delivering relevant sort of messages to our users and all that kind of stuff. But I realized after I got to a point where I was just sort of like just turning dials on the fringes, trying to get some incremental return on marketing spend, and I wasn't actually getting real motion in the face of our customers. So this was kind of super early on in the days of influencer marketing. We started getting more aggressive on leveraging influencers to actually amplify our brand, but we just didn't do it on a siloed basis. And if you follow Revolve at all, we actually created a community of influencers. So we actually had influencers who actually went to events that we actually put on where they're all together in a fun social party environment. And that experience was not only amazing for our customers to watch on all these digital channels, but also created authentic connections amongst the influencers that we actually brought into the Revolve umbrella. They actually felt the Revolve now part of their personal brand, which is super exciting. So it actually was an authentic way in which we could actually have them post about our clothes, wear our clothes, and not have it be sort of contrived. So a lot of it was really trying to drive into that authenticity around we're not just paying this person to post and that's it. No, we're actually creating a universe of people that actually drive what this actual brand and movement is.
You're the firm that you're a partner at, Upfront Ventures, the largest venture capital firm in Los Angeles, and invest in many or most of the great companies there, but also many great companies up here. But in particular, you've invested in a bunch of great communities like The Wing, Goat, Bird, and we talked about Mighty. I wonder, as a firm, or just its trends that you're seeing, do you see community becoming more and more something that people are talking about? Do you see it as a trend that's, you obviously do because you're investing in it, but what are you seeing on the outside, or other companies that are coming in from different partners and different people in your firm?
Yeah, so I'd say unfortunately I'm not seeing as many new pitches as I would like oriented around sort of community, or community being a core in terms of what they're using to drive growth. But if you look at Bird, The Wing, The Mighty, Goat, these companies are all super explosive in terms of growth because they're leveraging a community. They're leveraging it at the core to actually building that company. Look at Goat. The amount of sneakerheads that are actually constantly sharing, trading, talking about their shoes and finding out where they got it from. It's crazy. So I think it was one where we just naturally saw the most explosive consumer-oriented businesses leveraging community at its core. And for me, it's actually sometimes fun when I meet new prospects where they're not using community. I can sound like the smart guy in the room and be like, hey, why don't you actually layer in this tactic? And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. I think people are now starting more and more, they're starting to wake up to sort of this actually being something that's just not like a side thing you think at the end. This should be at the core of how you build your company. Because if you don't have a community, what do you have?
You were one of the first investors in Oculus and advisor to the company. what did you see in that product that made you think and believe that it was going to be something that was going to become big?
Well, it's crazy. I mean, putting on at the time, it was 2013, these like literally like duct tape wrapped goggles where he thrusted you into this virtual world, even though it looked pixelated, it was pretty magical. So it's very rare when
like
you actually
actual like goggles that they duct taped
it
like
was
the
like
front of?
it was not actually technically goggles, but I mean it was pretty ghetto. It was really, really ghetto. But the pace of innovation, every time I would catch up with my buddy Brendan, like every month he'd show me like a new iteration where I was like, oh my God, just be blown away. So it's very rare you see founders that are operating at that pace of just innovation that are building. I mean, VR. I mean, that was like science fiction until now. Maybe it still is science fiction because it's not doing that well. But it was really, really a compelling piece of tech. And I think the interesting thing too is that early days, you actually had this vibrant developer community that started to emerge, that were learning from one another and were learning how to create new types of interaction experiences that you couldn't actually get through designing for mobile or web. I think it was like someone made the quote was like, VR is like you're a painter and then like suddenly someone tells you have a new color to paint with and it's like black. So it's like it literally was like a new way in which you can actually express yourself. And there was this huge community started to emerge from within that. Unfortunately, kind of it's kind of taken a lot longer for it to actually to be ubiquitous, but it's only a matter of time.
Tell everyone about you. One of the things I really like about you, and having lived in Silicon Valley for 15 years, like I've met a lot of investors, but one of the things I think is unique about you versus a lot of investors is that you're actually somebody that's a builder too. You're an operator, and you're not just investing things, but you're actually building your own things. And one of the things you recently started working on is Valence, and I wonder, it's really totally needed, cool concept. I wonder if you could just tell people about what Valence is and how community is a key part of what you're building.
Yeah, so Valence is still a platform in stealth that will be publicly launching in the next like 3 weeks here or so. So again, like I love community at the core so much that I'm building my own community that we incubated as a company, put $1 million in as upfront. And where it spawned out of, I was just frustrated by whether it be employers or my peers saying, I'd love to either hire more black people or fund more black people. I have no idea where to find them. And then some people would go up to me and be like, oh, you're black. You probably know like every black person on the planet. I'm like, oh, I wish. It's like, let me take out my magical book of like every black engineer and like, here, you can hire like 30 of them. Like, no, it's not how it works. So I wondered like, why shouldn't there be an authentic both digital and in real life community that actually assembled the black community in a way that was, one, visually beautiful, super easy to navigate, and actually was a better UI than that of competing professional networks that are out there, and did it with style and a brand. So the superhero lens that we're applying to the entire sort of platform. And I was actually doing this as a side project because I was just kind of pissed off. And then I got all this feedback from people saying like, oh, that's like a business. And people want to fund the business. I'm like, no, it's my business. You're not funding it. So then, we decided to incubate it early this year, and it's been awesome. But the idea is just to create the most authentic, data-rich, but also functional community that solves the pipeline issue.
Yeah, I think, and one of the things I love about it is like you're putting these sort of underrepresented communities, and you're putting these people who like, some of these other professional networks, like there is no care taken whatsoever to people of color or other underrepresented groups, and you're literally like turning them into superheroes. Like you have these like the pictures you're taking and the way that you're putting their data, their profile, their professional network, like it's just like puts them on this huge pedestal, and it's like, which is so different from, what you see in other places. Yeah,
I mean, part of what we're trying to do is being in LA is take advantage of a lot of what we have down there, which is just brand, design, access to amazing creative and visuals. So one of the photographers we use that it's able to sort of photograph these people we spotlight through this lens is a guy named Kwaku Alston. So like, which is why my picture looks so weird is because he photographed me. So I usually don't photograph like that.
You don't have like blue and red lights in
your
bathroom.
I don't have that.
It's like, wow, look at me. Like, I got all these
So Kwaku, he's literally photographed everyone from like LeBron, Beyonce to Obama Obama, a lot of sort of movie posters and magazine covers he's done. And the idea is like, what if I actually take people that you've never heard of, that you probably should have heard about, and actually photograph them, present them almost through the lens of superheroes, then use that as a way to then post and actually amplify this community through social media, then to get better awareness around sort of what people are actually doing, so that people actually realize like the amazing stories around African Americans in terms of what they've actually done, and then being able to inspire the next generation of talent to also pursue careers that they probably weren't aware of.
Okay, so as we wrap up, you've got a room full of people that also believe what you believe in community, but as someone that represents, hundreds of millions of dollars in a firm of investment and companies that you're working with, like, pump us up a little bit. Why should we keep working in community? Like, what do you see that's big about the future of community?
So I mean, I represent hundreds of millions of dollars, like all the people in this room and outside represent and also have the ability to actually access hundreds of millions of people, if not more. And that's super powerful. And I think everyone's here because they're taking it seriously in terms of what they actually can do to learn and actually get better at actually assembling people together, whether it's digitally or in real life, to actually create movements. So I think it's sort of incumbent on everyone in this room to actually sort of like take that seriously, take that as a burden in terms of like, it's a lot of work to do, because I think people are sort of striving for this. It's actually things that give people purpose in their lives. And I think we have the ability to actually create real movements in our respective companies and industries that actually emotionally and spiritually bring people together in ways that community just doesn't, other things outside community can't do. So I think it's super exciting. I'm excited to be here.
Kobie Fuller, Upfront Ventures, thank you very much.